everybody for joining us. Hopefully this will be informative for everybody. I know I just found out that the kids will be home for the rest of the year, so I'm sure somebody will be asking some questions about that. Even though I typically work remotely, I don't typically work with children tagging along, so that'll be interesting. We want to first of all thank our sponsor, National Fuel. I think they are our annual sponsor, Amanda. That's right. We have a few things going on that I just want to make sure everybody's aware of. We have a survey out there still going. It's probably going to go till about the end of the month. Just trying to feel how our members are doing, what's going on, if they are offering something that we can provide that information to our membership. If they need something, if they have suggestions, just kind of get all that information. You just have to go to yeperie.org and it'll pop up, and it's kind of a pop-up that tags along every time you click a new button. So just trying to get as much information as we can. We've had a really good response on that so far. We currently have a wine fundraiser going on. Who doesn't like wine delivered to their door? It's through One Hope, and it's on a Facebook. It's a Facebook event that we're doing. It is 50% of each bottle of wine goes to one of their predetermined charities. They have environmental, they have animals, they have children, women, all different sorts of things. But for us, we're getting 10% of our total sales being coming back to us to donate to St. Martin's Center here in Erie. So that'll be used to the best benefit. This relatively small amount of money will be put to good use, especially in their food. Sorry, speaking of children, I have someone screaming and knocking at my door right now. We also have a YEP members Facebook group. If anybody's interested in joining that, let Amanda know and she can add you. Just kind of a not public forum where we can kind of share and kind of keep in touch with each other, so that if you have a question or you want to let somebody know about something, you just post it on there just to keep, kind of keep our normal interactions that we don't get to have now. We'll do that on Facebook, I guess. One last thing, we're also offering, we're having our members do an Instagram takeover. So a day in the life of a member. We have a spreadsheet out there. Amanda, I think you sent it out recently.
I just posted it in the Facebook group. So if you're interested, I can share it with you. Yeah, just thinking of something, do something to kind of share what our days look like now that they're quite different.
See what everybody else is up to. You guys probably hear from leadership enough. We'd like to hear from you guys. See what everybody else is up to. There's so many different industries, so many different people impacted in different ways. Some are having big contributions, and some, like me, just trying to get through the day. So let's see how things are going, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So I guess I'll pass it on to the next person. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Angela. So we're going to start. I'm just going to ask each of the panelists today to introduce themselves. Let us know what your role is, in your remote work capacity, and let us know how long you've been remote working. For those who don't know me, I'm Sean Fedorko. I run Radius CoWork. All the speakers today either are or have been members of Radius. Some were founding members. Some have used our space in various capacities throughout the years. But as the co-working space for the city of Erie, we really are the home for a lot of people who remote work from Erie, PA. And so they've decided to share some of what they've learned over their collective decades and more than a dozen businesses they've worked for or freelanced on their own. Share some of their experience with you so that you can be successful in remote work, but also so that you might influence your company to be a more remote-friendly company. How about we start off with the person who, for me, is right in the order. Matt Silva?
Hey, thanks, Sean. So my name is Matt Silva. I currently work remotely as a software engineer for a company named Baffle. I've been working remotely on and off probably for like 6 years or maybe a little north of that, mostly on. I have broad experience in different work environments, from freelance businesses. I worked in office at a tech startup company. I've worked from home in my living room, from within the basement. I've worked in coffee shops, co-working space that Sean knows. And right now I work from a wonderful detached office in my backyard. And it's great.
Megan, you want to take off next?
Sure. Hello, Megan Callahan. I'm a UI visual experience designer working at CloudBees. Our company is mostly remote. I've been working remotely for a few years now. Started when I was freelancing, kind of moved around. I've like Matt, I've worked in several unique office spaces. I'm currently in my house with my dog.
Corey?
Hello, everyone. My name's Corey Luthringer, and I have been doing the remote thing since around 2011 in various different ways. I've been working mainly in consulting and freelancing roles in various nonprofits for most of that time. Some of that time I was employed by different nonprofit organizations, and nearly all of those organizations I've worked for have been international. So the home office has been in another country, and so I've got a lot of experience in being a part of a team and managing people that are not on the same time zone, not even in the same remote area as I am. And yeah, I guess lately I've been working on starting my own nonprofit. So now I'm taking kind of the main role that that I used to be supporting, now heading that up. So that's what I've been working on remotely.
Thanks, Corey. And Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew Chernauskas. I'm a web developer and UX designer. I've been working remotely for about 12 years, some for entirely remote distributed companies and some for like half remote, half physical office companies. And I'm excited to talk with everybody today.
Thanks, Andrew. And then the last one, Matt Machuga.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Machuga. I've been working remotely since 2009 in some capacity and full-time since 2012. I'm an engineering manager at Auth0. Much like Corey, my company is global, and I've personally built a team between Spain and the West Coast. So I have quite a distributed model to manage as well.
Great. Thanks for introducing yourself, everybody. We're going to work through a few of the issues that the panelists decided were kind of most important for them to surface and their experiences speak the best to. But then we're going to save, the last 15 or 20 minutes to really dive into some of your questions. Since we do have this unique forum, we're able to take kind of your particular circumstance and maybe speak to it with our experience. So the first issue I want to bring up is that remote work is a learned skill. And something that all the panelists had pointed out was that right now, this is not a typical remote work situation. All of you have not simply transitioned to remote jobs. First and foremost, we are trapped in our homes dealing with a global pandemic. And then we're trying to get some work done. It's not first and foremost, we've chosen to be remote workers. And so some of the advice that we're going to give is really focused around triaging kind of your situation and how you can improve it. But a lot of the advice we're going to give is based on the fact that for the first time, you have the opportunity to explore what remote work is like. And post this pandemic, having learned this skill, you may choose to pursue a career in remote work, opening up new income and new career opportunities that might not have been available locally. So keep that in mind as you're asking exactly which questions. Is this a triage question, or maybe is this a preparing you for the future question? The first thing I want to ask about is work-life alignment and work-life balance. Working from home is, of course, very different. Some of you are remote workers who don't work from home. You choose to work from the co-working space or cafes or elsewhere. How do you as remote workers balance the demands that are right in front of you related to work and the demands that are right in front of you related to family and home life? I'll let whoever wants to take that first raise their hand or unmute.
I'll be quick on the trigger then.
Good. There we go.
Why not? So I'm not sure whether it's a side effect of being a remote company. Sorry, not a remote company, a global company. But I find that my work-life balance gets juggled around a little bit. But I do have the flexibility to adapt to it. So I start early in the morning because I do have a teammate in Spain. And sometimes I wind up working late at night because I have to speak to someone in Australia. And usually that's okay because I will just take a couple of hours off during the day to make up for it. but depending on what time zone needs me in what meeting, sometimes my days go stupidly long and I'm disappointed with myself. But it helps for me to like leave my computer in this room and not bring it around with me, because then I'm not as tempted to grab it. Or if you work out of Radius or a co-working space, or I'm sorry, a cafe, you can get a little bit of a break because you can decompartmentalize a little bit. It's a struggle, but I had the same struggle when I worked in an office. I'd want to get something done. I'd have a laptop. I had the ability to work from it from home. So I don't really notice too much of a difference in that area.
Now, I think it's important to note, those of you who are parents with young children. So Matt Silva, Matt Machuga, Andrew Chernauskas, you're all parents with young children. Corey, you are, of course, married and at home, and your husband works remote as well. And Megan, you have a dog. So, you know, there's a lot of variety in kind of what your home life is going to look like, and even at different stages of working remote. Because Andrew, I know when you began working remote, you didn't have children. Can you talk a little bit about that transition when you worked remote, but before starting a family and then after?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think Matt was right on when he said compartmentalize, you know, is important if you can. Something I've done from the very beginning was to build in my own commute. So at the end of the workday, I'll go for a walk around the block, a 15-minute walk outside, just to mentally give my brain a chance to turn off work mode and decompress what was, you know, I went through the day. And I've noticed the past couple of weeks, even that's not been working. So instead of just going for a walk, I've started just a light jog, just to get a little more endorphins, a little more fitness, just to make sure to get that fresh air, I think is super important. And that bookends your day to make it easier to kind of switch into kids mode. I can have a bad habit of sitting down at the dinner table and still be thinking about work, and nobody enjoys that. And likewise in the morning, I don't have my first cup of coffee until I sit down at my desk ready to start work. And that's kind of like just a little reward. Okay, you've started the workday, so you get coffee. So kind of putting in those little rituals. I would say one of the nicest things about, you know, working from home recently is the opposite of that is being able to eat lunches with my kids and my wife. So while it is important to kind of have dedicated large chunks of uninterrupted time as best as you can, because interruptions happen, don't forget that, you know, seize the opportunity to be like, hey, I'm going to break out my lunch, you know, and take that lunch break with my family in the middle of the day. So yeah, you know, I think, you know, when transitioning from, you know, not having kids to having kids, you know, closing your office door and setting expectations to say, hey, if that door is closed, that means I'm on a call. If it's open, you can come in and ask a question, but I might be focused on something else. And just trying to set up, you know, expectations like that. And also with your employees or your coworkers as well, if it's urgent, you can send me a text, but otherwise just put it in Slack, or if it's not urgent at all, put it in email, because that way I can turn Slack notifications off at the end of the night and not get the trivial stuff, but I still know that my coworkers can reach me because we've set up this hierarchy of priority in case, you know, the server's on fire in the middle of the night. But making sure Slack notifications are turned off, but still having a way in case of emergencies to people can contact you.
Andrew, you touched on a really important keyword, a ritual. And I want to come back to this what you brought up at the end, this subject of tools. But, you know, ritual, I've observed and heard from many of you, is extremely important. I know, Matt Machuga, you have a morning ritual of making a Chemex, and your day doesn't begin until you make the Chemex. And I know, Matt Silva, I think you've got one of the most fascinating structures of separation to compartmentalize when you are in work mode and when you're in dad mode. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about almost the heroic measures you went to in order to accommodate your work life at home?
I'm assuming you're talking to me.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I mentioned I churned through, you know, different work environments, and where I've ended up is with a completely separated office from my house in my backyard. So it's a detached office, and it works wonderfully. albeit, the kids will come run out here, they'll open up the my shed and jump in while I'm on a call. That's okay, but my, I'm always been comfortable with, family jumping in and interrupting, because the companies that I work for and the companies that I look for have very good values when it comes to family. So it's never like an awkward moment, or never like, stressful situation, because I could be like, hello, say hello to everybody. But that being said, even though I'm comfortable, I recognize that you got to have, the ability to focus when you're at home. And I do want to circle back and just echo what you said at the very beginning. Right now in this period, this is far from what remote work looks like, and work from home looks like. This is a very different situation. And so for folks that are, transitioning into this, it's everyone who works from home is inevitably met with like some amount of guilt when they're taking like personal time, especially when you're tied to your job, because it's always right there. You can't leave your office when you're working from home. So I've got I'm veering off the topic here a little bit, but just trying to get back to creating those routines and creating those hours of work is very important. And then, to briefly circle back and answer your question, I've been able to literally detach my workspace so that I can focus on work and have very minimal distractions.
Corey, when I had asked about kind of subjects that you wanted to bring up, one of the things I thought you pointed out that was most important is like standards of productivity, right? The feeling like we have to always be churning things out now when we're in our home environment. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I particularly liked your statistic of, how many hours someone is actually productive in an office.
Yeah, I think we all kind of get caught up in the rat race, and working from home, that might get amplified a lot, because you feel, even if those expectations are not there, you might feel that they're there from those superiors above you, that you have to be working all the time, you have to be available all the time. But I want you all to just kind of think back to, not so long ago when you were actually at your office, and think, how many productive hours a day did you have? Because I think for me, and for nearly everyone globally, there's been studies of this, productive hours in the day are somewhere around 4 to 6, if you're lucky. And that counts, in an 8-hour office day, you've got lunch breaks, you've got talking to people about random things, you've got a lot of other things going on, but still, you feel like you're being productive because you're sitting in an office environment for 8 hours. So, I think starting out working from home, you can kind of get caught up in that and thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't put in my 8 hours of productive time today, therefore I'm this huge failure and I'm so unproductive. And that just leads you down a rabbit hole of beating yourself up about it. And especially now when things are very new, for a lot of you that are working from home for the first time, things are, let's be honest, really stressful. You've got a global pandemic, people are freaking out, and things are just different than they've always been. There's a lot on everyone's mind. And so just to remember and to continually remind yourself that if you've put in a good, solid 4 hours, pat yourself on the back, because that's enough. The work will be there tomorrow. The world's not going to come crashing down because you didn't send that one last email. And spending hours and hours and hours in front of your computer is just not helpful for anyone's mental health. And I think similar to that is, the idea of being a little bit more flexible. I think coming from a very 9-to-5 environment, you might feel like you have to be sitting there from 9 to 5. Some jobs, maybe that is the case, that is really important. But for those jobs that's not important, learn to be a little bit more flexible in the schedule that works for you in this new normal. A lot of you that have kids at home, you might say, my best productive hours, actually where I can be productive, are between, let's say, 4 and 8 p.m. And that means that maybe with a partner in the house, you can trade off and spend more time with the kids, or doing other things, or taking care of parents or grandparents in those other hours that would traditionally be in your 9 to 5. But, kind of just keeping everything in perspective and doing what you can during this period and not trying to beat yourself up over it.
Can I jump in on that?
Please.
So for somebody who lives alone and went from full-time freelance remote worker to employed full-time, remote worker, it was really hard for me to snap out of the, oh my God, I'm not working every single minute, which means I'm not making money, which means I'm failing. And then there's no one else here to snap me out of it. I don't have kids coming up like, okay, let's go play. I don't have like family members knocking on the door. I have a dog now, but he's pretty pushy. What helped me was I don't come in this room unless I'm working. So Matt has his like fancy little extension of his house that's not a part of his house. I have a room that I don't come into unless I'm working. That's what this is for me. So it automatically sets that vibe for me, and it helps me feel less guilty in the evening hours when I'm not working, to remind myself, okay, well, that's okay. Everything's okay. To touch on everything Corey said, it's totally fine. I was not this productive before because I was in an office, and now I'm like 6 times as productive and I still feel guilty. So learning to detach, and like what Andrew said, going outside, taking a step outside and looking further away than this far at your screen really helps you to just snap out of work mode. And all you need is a good like 10 seconds to snap out, and then you feel better.
So these are all really great points about that adaptation of your space. One of the things that, Andrew, you had started to bring up, and I'd like all of you to speak to, are communication tools, but also communication habits. So as we began this whole panel discussion, it took us a moment to figure out who was going to be the first panelist to introduce themselves. There are mores and norms to communicating over Zoom, over Slack. Andrew, you had demonstrated the differentiation between importance when you hit me up on text, when you hit me up on Slack, and when you send an email. Can you all talk about the habits that you have in your companies, and maybe some that you've influenced or some you've adopted in your own life around communication tools and what working at home kind of expects of you so that you don't feel like you're expected to be always on? Andrew, I know you've spoken a lot about this. You want to take the lead there?
Sure. I think video is really important. A lot of companies I've worked with make it mandatory. It can be a little awkward at first if you're not used to it, but I think it makes a huge difference, especially when people are dealing with more, and if the kids are being crazy one day and your project manager can see that on your face a little bit, they might not be pushing you to get that deadline done because you can see just a little bit of those mannerisms a lot better. And just kind of trying to set up a hierarchy to say, okay, the big thing that really kicked me on this was I got a Slack notification while I was trick-or-treating with my kids. And it wasn't a huge work issue, but it was, my coworker was in Texas, so like at the time shift, he wasn't like talking to me that far after hours, but I was just thinking about it the whole time, about how am I going to solve this code problem. And that was kind of the day I said, hey, all these notifications, and even during the workday, I think Slack has some features where you can have do not disturb mode and just be like, hey, I'm going to do heads down, non-distracted work when I can. And just, talking to your coworkers about expectations there, not expecting an immediate response. If somebody doesn't get back to you, feel free to reach out to them the next day, because I know a lot of people can, kind of forget about stuff if it's in a direct message or things like that. And you can do, in Slack, you can do /remind to set yourself little reminders about a particular thread or about a particular comment. And yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of different tools out there that you can, look at, but yeah, try to reduce as many notifications as all. And a lot of people who aren't used to Slack see it as this huge fire hose, this little, it's always, you could get drowned always checking it. It's just like Twitter and Facebook where the feed scrolls infinitely. Set times to check it. You don't always have to keep up with everything. If you're in too many channels, see if you can get out of some. And you can set channel specific alerts where, we have some water cooler and and, you know, more conversational hallway kind of channels. One of my favorite is Dogs channel, where people post pictures of their dogs. You can turn those notifications down, but still keep the notifications when someone's messaging you directly, to try to balance off that time. And just one more quick note too, you don't want to map your in-person meetings one-to-one to Zoom meetings, because video conferencing is great, but it's draining in a very unique way. So two things: if you do have a Zoom meeting and it's like an hour-long meeting, plan for that last 10 or 15 minutes, plan to end 10 or 15 minutes early, which one, gives you a little bit of time for people to figure out if they're muted or if their camera's not working, but two, gives everybody a chance to either make some notes on the meeting or go for a walk outside or get another cup of coffee. Because when you're in a physical workplace, if you're going from meeting room to desk, you build in that time. But virtually, that expectation might not be there. So you want to make sure you've got buffer time at the end of your meetings where you say, no, the meeting's done. That gives people 5, 10, 15 minutes after each meeting. And just be conscious where maybe if it's, if you need to hash out pros and cons on something, yeah, maybe that's something that's good to be done video because you're throwing around a lot of ideas. But some of the best ideas might not come until you're showering in the morning the next day, or especially if you've got some, introverts or people who are more used to critically thinking, not on the spot. Maybe that should be a discussion thread. Maybe that should be a Slack channel. Maybe, things don't have to be synchronous, on point all the time. So take a couple of your meetings, like even stand-up meetings. There's a lot of great bots you can put in. Instead of doing a 15-minute stand-up meeting, just report that, in a Slack channel, and then use that 15-minute time to talk about family and de-stress and the real face-to-face stuff where face-to-face is actually important.
And you negotiate and build these things with your teams. And I know, Machuga and Matt Silva, Megan and Corey, your teams stretch the globe. Can you talk a little bit about how you manage this communication? But all, part of it is, how do you make it clear that you are available and attentive? But how do you manage the expectations and boundaries you want people to respect as well? And I will take a note now that we've been talking for about 20 minutes. If anybody does have a question that you'd like me to bring up to the panelists, you can put that in the Zoom group chat and I'll see that to ask them, or you can add it in the Q&A.
Well, I can jump in on this. One of the things that I noted is, just because my little Slack bubble is green, it doesn't mean that I'm actively available. Andrew touched on all this stuff, but there are a lot of tools out there. I know that you have a question coming up about tools, but Google, when you set meetings in Google, you can opt for it to be, instead of half hour, 25 minutes. So the tail end of that, people get that break that they need. You can also integrate Google Calendar with your Slack so that it shows that you're in a meeting. That way, people, if they're messaging you and your bubble's green, nobody is on the other end sitting there just like, oh, I know they're there. I know they're sitting there. Look, they saw my message. Are they ignoring me? It doesn't happen. People know that, it's a work day. You're not just twiddling your thumb, staring at your screen, waiting for them to message you. There's a lot of tools like that. And I'm in a very similar situation. I think it was Matt said he works with somebody in Spain and also somebody in Australia. Same exact situation. I have to, make sure I have an app on my computer that gives me everybody's time zones, so I know what time it is there. And I send them a note like, hey, I'm wrapping up my day. If it's an emergency, hit me up, push the notification. If not, I'll catch you tomorrow. So it's just kind of setting boundaries and also not assuming that these people know that you're not working. Some people forget that you're in a different time zone. So I just try to send friendly notes and they do the same for me. So it works out.
Does anyone else want to say anything about managing those expectations before we move on to asking some of your best tools for remote work?
I would say if you have the privilege baked into your job, or if while the pandemic's going on, your manager isn't a total jerk, there should be that expectation where you will be doing some form of childcare throughout the day. You have to take care of other emergency situations. You have to try to get to the grocery or order groceries when you can. Those things should be baked into your job. And if they're not, you should really push for it. Because this is a weird time for everybody. But like on my team, I don't actually know when anybody's working. We have certain hours that we agree on overlapping. So everybody in Spain up to the West Coast, we all try to overlap for at least 1 hour. And there's 4 hours in each grouping of time zone. But beyond that, I don't know when somebody's starting their day or ending their day. And it doesn't ultimately matter because we can work asynchronously outside of scheduled meetings. I still have team members who have like worked with me for 2 years and they still apologize like, oh, sorry, I wasn't around. And it's a constant reminder. I don't care that you're not around. I'm sending you a message on Slack as an asynchronous means because that's how our company works.
Yeah.
So I like to reinforce that whenever I can.
And I want to echo pretty much everything everybody else here is saying as far as like expectations to the extent that you can. Now I will say that, you know, as you're gathering here, as everybody's speaking about this, you're learning that the work from home or work remote rules are more or less established for us. So as you're transitioning into this, you're going to find a lot of friction going into it. Like, don't think that you're going to go in here and be like, okay, you know, don't bother me.
We do have a couple questions.
Yeah, shoot, go ahead.
So has anyone experienced negativity from coworkers because you are working at home? So of course, just because you're on a remote team doesn't mean everyone on that team is remote. Some remote teams have a headquarters in a central office. Has anyone experienced that kind of challenge or negativity? And I'm actually thinking, Andrew, of some of the experiences you've had being on only a partially remote team. Do you want to touch on that or somebody else?
Yeah, just, you know, 2 quick stories where one, I was working for a team, the headquarters in Texas, but probably half the employees were remote. And there was a Friday company meeting. And I got a message from the HR director that said, hey, Andrew, I'll speak to you personally on Monday. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, all week I'm going to be stressed out. There's going to be this horrible news. But actually what it was, you know, eventually I kind of, you know, just messaged her back after getting worried for a few minutes. Said, hey, what is this about? Can you just give me a summary? She's like, oh, sorry, yeah, I just know the video conference microphone in the conference room isn't that good. So I wanted to make sure you could hear all the information clearly. So I was just going to present it to you personally. It's, you know, just something boring like, you know, insurance or something to go over. So I think it's really important to assume the best intentions when someone's communicating. You know, most people aren't out to get to everybody. They just might not understand. They might be having a bad day. They might not understand why a decision was made. So just assume good intent and follow up and clarify. Sometimes you have to be humble and ask, and just don't be afraid to ask. I know that can be really tough to do. But yeah, just over communicate. Especially because, I mean, I've caught myself, you know, I'll read a Slack message or an email 1 or 2, 3 times, and I won't notice that there's a big knot in the middle of the sentence. And I'll be thinking they're saying one thing when they're saying the exact opposite.
Andrew, you made 2 great points. You know, assume the best intentions, that everybody's trying to communicate, but because we're not in person, it's not always clear, and to over communicate, just signaling. And there's a great article I'll link to that you actually sent to me, Andrew, about signaling and how much that over communication is really helpful so that people do understand our intentions. You know, some of the questions that are coming in are about this sort of interpersonal relationship. One thing I do want to make a point about are the differentiation in what kind of company has a remote job. So there's a remote friendly company, which might be a company that allows some people to work remote, and they maybe even encourage it, and they try to embrace it. And a remote friendly company might do what Andrew just described, where they have a big all hands meeting, and they're aware that they have remote people, and so they're going to make some contingent plan to adapt to it. And managers may be thinking along those lines. Then there's remote first companies, where every single plan is made with the remote workers' well-being in mind first. So a meeting wouldn't even be scheduled or designed unless it could be attended and participated in by the remote worker. And so those are like ideal situations right now. Maybe you work with a company that was remote friendly, is becoming remote first, it was already remote first. More likely, your companies have never had a remote employee before. Managers are struggling with that. And a lot of managers understand management as command and control. They need to tell you what to do, and then they need to make sure you're doing it. And it's a little like a carrot and a stick. There's not a whole lot of faith there. Matt Machuga, you were describing a lot of a faith-based system where you're not too concerned with when you're working, with the butt in the seat, but with the output. So one of the questions that would like someone to speak to who has maybe had a bad management experience, what could you tell people about being good managers of a remote team? Megan or maybe Corey, someone we haven't heard from recently.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I've had plenty of bad managers that don't know how to manage remote workers. I think one thing is the expectation component that we were talking about before. And one thing that I had finally convinced one of my managers to do, because he was sending emails, at all times of day, all days of the week, and traveling internationally, you kind of get a sense of, well, okay, maybe he's in India, so that time actually makes sense for him to be sending emails. But when it's not a time for him to be sending emails, then you get so nervous about, well, do I need to respond to that right away? Do I not? And so as a good manager, if any of you are managers, one tool that is helpful is to delay your emails to send at appropriate times, so that you're not setting the expectation that everyone needs to be working on the same schedule that you are. So that was one thing that was important. And another kind of good management practice, I think, would be, and maybe this is not really relevant for right now, but in the future, if remote working does become more mainstreamed, is to make sure that you do have the face-to-face time with your team every once in a while. I was for 3 years part of a team that was headquartered in Switzerland, and I was the only person remote. And so I completely hear you, Andrew, with some of your stories. They would just sometimes forget that I existed. And so there would be meetings and there would be events and happy hours that everyone would participate in, and I would just get left out. And so, being more conscious of that and inviting people and having the opportunity for the team to all get together, even just once a year, is so valuable in building those sort of relationships that you need. And I think I just wanted to touch on one thing that Matt Machuga mentioned is really about a good manager is one that can trust their employees and one that can really be comfortable with the fact that you don't need to know every second of every day, every little email that they are writing, and every, this is not a time to start being a micromanager, basically. People will do their work, and this is an opportunity to see how they can do it better and improve on systems that have been in place before. So.
I want to flip that. Matt, were you going to say something? Matt Machuga? Because I actually have a follow-up question I kind of want to direct at you. I want to flip this a bit and explain to people, how can you be a good remote employee? If you're being earnest, you're really trying to be a good remote employee to garner the trust of your boss. How can you kind of teach your boss to pay attention to the signals that you are doing good work and to communicate better with them? Because I know you've worked with a lot of teams on this.
Right. So that was kind of the direction I wanted to take it. And I do want to caveat, I do have a strong personality. So I am very blunt about most things, that I am forceful when I need to be. At my last job, I was remote employee number 1. And as Corey said, sometimes you get forgotten, or even if I'm not forgotten, people don't want to take the time to accommodate the fact that you cannot hear them in a group meeting. So we had a really crappy telecom system in the Pittsburgh office, and I could not hear them most of the time. And sometimes I just had to rage quit a meeting. So nope, I'm not coming back in until this is fixed. And it ultimately took me 3 years to get a decent microphone put into that room. And people cared, just not the right people cared who controlled the budget, who controlled the hardware installation and things like that. So it took some effort, but I ultimately got it done. And I was very forceful with things where the team would communicate, but then they would have communication in the hallway, and I wouldn't know about it because I'm not there. So between me having an excellent manager and an excellent team, it was remotely easy for me to convince them bring all the important communication into Slack where I could see it. And that is where we need to keep the truth. So if you want to demonstrate to your manager that you can be a remote employee who's successful, you do have to put in extra effort. And you have to make sure that your outcomes and your output are visible. That way they don't keep crawling all over you, asking if you're there, asking if you're available. You don't need to work overtime. You just have to put in a little extra effort to get there.
Megan, and kind of to the speaking again to that management relationship, I know with some of your remote companies, you've had challenges with management, and you've worked as a team, a department, to communicate and improve that situation. Do you want to speak a little bit to that? Because I think it's important that we understand that we're not totally isolated as a remote worker. Right now, many of us have remote peers, and collectively we can talk about what we're learning will or won't help our companies succeed, and we can communicate that to management. Do you want to speak about that?
Yeah, a lot of conversations, like Matt said, can get lost because we're remote, because it's easier to have them elsewhere, and then it's not documented, it's not seen anywhere. So at least in my situation, I make it a point to have Zoom calls with the people that I'm working with, make sure we have an agenda, even if just the agenda is, okay, let's check in with everybody, let's see how things are going. What are some of the things that you're running into that are blockers? What are some of the issues? One of those meetings is with my manager, so it's just constant over communication. Even if you say the same thing 17 million times, just keep saying it, because one time, that's all it takes for the right person to be in the meeting and hear it for the first time. Because you can be on a meeting and we're still in front of our screens with all of our work right off there in another tab, like people aren't always paying attention when they're on the call, which is a bummer, but that is also sometimes remote working. So
let's talk about tools. I want to talk about tech tools, standing desks, software. You talk about messages coming in. While I've been leading this panel, I've gotten 12 direct messages, some related to this panel, some coworkers who don't even know I'm hosting it right now. So that's certainly one of the great advantages we have right now, is that everybody's going through a crash course in learning tools. So what are some of the tips to either your physical tools that have been really helpful, standing desks and webcams, to some of the software tools that have been extremely helpful as a remote worker? Megan, I had no idea that Slack would be able to pay attention to my calendar and turn my available light when I'm in a meeting. That's going to change my life. So stuff like that.
I snooze my notifications if I'm joining an important meeting. I'll admit I don't always snooze my notifications when I join a meeting, but it doesn't mean I'm not paying attention. I also have my nice standing desk, which helps me a lot throughout the day, because you can't just sit like this all day. That's just not good.
You've got more though. In particular, you set up a better mic system. Can you talk about what was happening?
It was on clearance. No, I'm just kidding. My other mic on my headphones kept brushing up and hitting everything. My mic that I had set on my desk, you could hear my mouse moving around every time. You got to make sure people can hear you when you're talking in meetings, or else nothing you say is going to be heard. So mic seems important.
Matt Silva, as a guy who's built an entire remote work bastion in your backyard, what did you equip it with? What's the software you use to be effective?
It's pretty much all the same that everybody else here is outlining. It's all the same stuff, just repackaged in an awesome space.
Nicely phrased.
Can I talk about some non-tech tools?
Yeah,
please do.
So one thing that I've recently been doing a lot of, especially if you have a lot of meetings where you don't necessarily have to talk a lot, but you have to listen a lot, is that I do those meetings on a walk, or while I'm doing something that is minimally brain intensive, but I would say more active. So gardening, dishes, laundry, something that just keeps your brain a little bit more active, such that you're not tempted to go look at emails and go look at notifications and do other things, but not so distracting that you can't pay attention to what's going on. So I do that a lot. And if it's a meeting where I have to look at a screen because somebody is screen sharing, then I will often have some sort of art project or something that I can do, which can be as simple as like a coloring book, just to keep my hands busy and not on a mouse, clicking onto other screens and trying to do other things. And that is enough to just keep my brain focused on the meeting, so that actually everyone on the meeting gets the most out of it. So I would definitely, if that is something that you are struggling with in, keeping focused with millions of other notifications and things, Sean, I probably have notifications, but I haven't actually looked at them.
That's
so
incredible discipline, and I'm adding coloring books to the equipment list.
Coloring books.
It's
But it
brilliant.
can be anything. I mean, people I know sit and like crochet and knit during meetings or do embroidery. I mean, whatever it is that just keeps you a little bit busy. Yeah, whatever it is for you.
It sounds like some boring meetings.
Sometimes you are in boring meetings, and that's life, right? I mean.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I do want to add to the distraction bit. Often what I'll do, because I do have a good tech setup with gigantic screens, but often I'll just consolidate down to my laptop because it's just one single small screen and I have to be very focused on what it is that I'm doing. So I find myself doing that.
Yeah, I would add to that. We all talked about the importance of trying to have a ritual or a physical space to kind of separate your brain between work and family and everything else, which I totally agree with. But you might not have that luxury. So I would say anything you can do to kind of get your brain into that mode. Maybe if you're used to having a whole bunch of monitors and stuff and you need to focus, unplug them all and just look at your laptop screen. Or if it is a meeting, get a standing desk and or just walk around the kitchen, standing, to kind of give your brain a different mode. Get a candle, light a candle, and say, hey, when I've got the candle lit next to my laptop, I'm in work mode. Get a smart light bulb. I like Megan's colored light in the background. It just kind of, even if you don't have a dedicated office space at home, do some sort of tricks to say, okay, this is my working time. There's also a thing called the Pomodoro technique, which is named after a little tomato kitchen timer, where you just kind of set the timer and say, hey, I'm going to work for 15 minutes, and then I'm going to take a 5-minute break. And just kind of breaking things up into small chunks as best as you can. What's the next best thing I can work on? Don't worry about everything that needs to get done today. Just say, okay, I know the kids are going to interrupt me because they want lunch in 20 minutes. But I'm going to say, hey, the next 10 minutes, I'm going to try to get this thing done.
Yeah, you talked about the Slack remind command. I use that to remind me every hour to stand up and go get a glass of water. So 1, I drink water. 2, I stand up. And 3, I look further away from 10 feet, just in front of my face.
Related to tools, it's going to depend on what video software you use, but Zoom has it, Microsoft Teams has it. I'm using it as a toy right now, but this is my virtual background here. If you are doing something in an area where you might have kids jumping all over you, or sometimes your significant other or kids might not be appropriately dressed, or other situations that I've encountered while working remotely, this is like a lifesaver. And I do encourage it when I see these things pop up, like, hey, you might want to try this bit of functionality. It can save from some extra embarrassment. In general, I do like to leave mine off or in play mode, just so people can get they can see my personality a little bit, because it helps with the empathy. It helps with bonding. But if you're in a chaotic area, I really recommend this. It's fantastic, and it prevents your coworkers from knowing how crazy things are.
So we had a question, before Zoom, or really even now, other than Zoom, for people who have not used all of the different video conferencing tools, what's out there? What could they be utilizing? I know I'm a big fan, in a lot of teams I'm in, of using the video call tool in Slack, because I can see if somebody's around. I send a quick message and say, are you available for a call? And if they say yes, I can hit call, and it's available 1-to-1 on the free version. What other tools might be out there for video conferencing or live communication?
We use Zoom and Slack and Google Meet. I think that's it. But we use Zoom when you can control somebody else's screen. So if I need help from an engineer, I can call them and they can control my screen. When you can draw on Slack calls, that's also super helpful.
I think before Zoom and I mean, something that we were using 10 years ago was Skype, which has a lot of downsides to it, I would say. It doesn't have as much functionality, and frankly, it doesn't work very well when you have more than probably 4 or 5 people on it. But that was sort of the go-to for a long time, and probably what prompted all of these other companies to start creating all these other things that are out there. I think there's a lot of GoToMeeting is a good one. There's one, Adobe, I forget the name, Adobe something that's very similar to GoToMeeting, where it allows you to do like an e-learning kind of a situation. So there's functionality in there that you can have polls and ask questions and have the audience click on them and things. So it keeps things a little bit interactive. So those are always fun. Okay.
And then as we kind of close things out here and transition into what can more than easily become a virtual happy hour, if anybody would like to DM me a question, go ahead and send that as a private message, and I'll bring that up to our participants, because I'd love to really get some of the questions of people who are actually struggling with this maybe for the first time. But also, again, keep in mind what I said at the beginning. This is a multi-month crash course training period in how to be part of a remote team. If you want to understand how to find remote positions, how to evaluate remote teams, because you're thinking that this might actually be a way your career might go, looking to opportunities that are national or international to find your next career move, we've got a panelist of people who have done exactly that. So go ahead and DM me those questions. I'll start throwing them out. I've got a few come in right now. Is everybody just talking about screen sharing? Great, perfect. Does anybody else have any questions you want to shoot out in the chat? I know one that had been asked of me earlier was, how do you end your day? Like, how do you, because the pressure to answer the next email is kind of infinite, right? And especially if you've got a team that's everywhere and on a different schedule than you. How do you reinforce that particular boundary?
I have a whole routine set up for my end of day, but Matt, you can go first.
No, please continue.
Well, I was gonna say my lights. I have a bunch of automatic lights on at my house that turn on. They all just are turning on now because it's almost 5. This one normally turns right at 5 purple, which is like done, end of day.
That's what I do.
All my notifications shut off at 5. It doesn't. Again, I'm guilty. I sometimes sit way past 5, but it's a whole thing where, you get up. I got a dog that needs to get fed and let outside. Once I walk out of this room after 5 p.m., you detach from work.
Mine is just more of a social contract with my kids. So I can get my kids ready in the morning for school. Now they're just here until whenever I need to go upstairs for work. But at 5, I get limited time with them in the evening before bedtime. So at 5, that's the latest I'm willing to work. It's something I work out with employers ahead of time and just say, like, I'm done. I'm not going to work past that. I will jump back on after they go to bed if I need to talk to a different country. But after that time, my kids need me, and I want to see them before they go to sleep. So that's my motivator.
For me, my husband and I both work from home, and we actually share an office at home. So it's something that we try and keep each other accountable to, that, right around 3:30, 4 o'clock, we'll both kind of say, okay, well, what's your next sort of couple of hours looking like, and what time do you think you will wrap up? And we can kind of agree mutually on, well, I've got something that'll take another hour and a half, I've got something that's 2 hours, and then we can both sort of say, okay, well, 5:30 is the cutoff for today. And then we can both sort of close the computers, walk away, and like Megan, we don't come back into the room. So, it's kind of nice, and probably in a situation that many of you that are living not alone at home right now might be in. If you have multiple people working from home, you can kind of help to keep each other accountable on that aspect.
Yeah, I would kind of talk. I have a few apps that I use to kind of help out. One is an app called Streaks, S-T-R-E-A-K-S, and that gives me 6 things that I try to get done every day. like drink water or don't drink too much coffee or, stretch or have, quiet time. And that's kind of a nice way to kind of check that I've done this and just kind of keep that motivation. And it's great too where, especially when stuff is so different these days, don't feel bad if you don't get everything done every day. But the one thing, the handful of things that you didn't get done, that's your priority for the next day. So don't miss it 2 days in a row. Two other apps I would mention is I never thought I'd be big into like meditation, but it's harder for me. I can't just turn off work. So I'll definitely like go for a walk outside, give my brain time to decompress. And I've started doing a little more meditation, and there's a lot of apps out there. Some of them are really, I don't know, crunchy, hippie. Like I didn't get into them. The ones that I think are the most, I don't know how to say, just kind of more with my personality is Headspace, which is a really good one. And Balance is a new one. And Balance is given away a year for free just because everybody's kind of going crazy. So if you need something to work with anxiety or decompress your brain, but you don't want like super hippy dippy stuff, those are two good apps to kind of a nice introduction that you won't feel like you're going into weird territory.
There was a question that came in specifically for parents, that some have said they feel like they've gotten a good handle on how to adapt during the school year to the rhythms of being a parent that works at home. But for those who are parents, is it meaningfully different, or how do you balance that when the kids have all the free time to be home all day long? I don't know which parent wants to tackle that. Matt Silva?
I don't know if I'd give the best representation of that. Fortunately, my wife she's stay at home. So, this is like being on summer vacation for us, basically.
Yep,
as
same.
Well positioned to transition into this unfortunate situation. So I probably won't be able to answer, empathetically.
Well, Matt Machuga, you actually gave a good example of this. When you leave at 5, you've told me before when I've tried to schedule a meeting with you at 5 o'clock that's when you give your wife a break. So you not only have that social contract with your children, you have that with your spouse as well. If she's been taking care of the kids all day, at 5 o'clock, she knows relief is coming. And keeping that commitment is probably very important.
Oh yeah, I'm a dead man if I don't.
It is 5 o'clock now, Matt Machuga. Do you need to go?
I made an arrangement for today.
Compromise.
That brings up a good change that I made this past week, where before my wife and I would do a handoff each night for bedtime, where one of us would read a couple bedtime stories, and then the other would, brush teeth and get him in bed and sit with him as they fall asleep. But that wasn't working very well just because, or recently, just because the kids are at home all day. So we changed it just a little bit to say, okay, instead of doing that every night, I'm going to do the entire bedtime routine tonight. You do the entire bedtime routine tomorrow. And we're still doing the same amount of effort, but we're grouping it into larger, uninterruptible chunks, which has just been so clutch, where like I've had a long day and my wife says, hey, I've got bedtime tonight. It's like, oh, good. It's like we talk about, time blocking during our workday to try to have uninterruptedly concentrated time. So that's kind of a change that we've made just this week that's really helped of instead of each doing 30 minutes handoff, say, no, you do the full hour, then the next day you do the full hour.
Okay, our YEP president is using her executive authority to chime in here.
Yeah, do it.
Oh, let me unmute you. There you go.
Oh, okay. Good. We like my background.
Looks good.
For those of you that are too young to know this is Pee-wee's Playhouse. So similar situation. Before I worked from home. My husband he's a teacher for Mill Creek. So we had the kids in school. I have a kindergarten and a preschooler, 3 and 5. I worked mostly out of Radius, but I have an office. I'm completely remote worker. But now we're adjusting to this, having these little kids home who now have to do schoolwork on a computer. and they're 3 and 5. How does that even work? Like the moment you put them on a computer, they want to do it all day long. So it's very frustrating. And now my husband has responsibilities for school, write lessons plans, provide papers, grade them, reply to every parent's response every 5 minutes. So he's now a remote worker who's never been a remote worker, and slowly taking advice. But I've seen him stress out about this change. So from his perspective, and I'll chime in for him, blocking that time. He constantly feels like he needs to be checking his email needs to sit at his computer and wait for those emails to come in. So I kind of gave him this advice of block your time. You and I have this conversation. So we get up in the morning and we say, what does your day look like today? Because every day at this point is a little bit different. What's your day look like today? What do you have to have done today? So my job isn't that I have to be there from 9 to 5 or whatever. I just have things I need to have done by a certain date. So I need to have this project done by this date. It doesn't matter when I do it, how I do it, as long as it's done by that time frame and it's, great quality. So we really have this conversation in the morning that says, what do you need to do today? How many hours do you need to work? And with 2 little kids, we focus because they get up at 6 o'clock at the latest, typically. So we spend that time in the morning to get breakfast, have our coffee. We take an hour with the kids to do their schoolwork. And then the kids are just, for the rest of the day, try to keep them off the screens because they're so little, but do what you can to live. But we rotate time. Say, okay, well, I need to get this done. I have 2 hours of work I need to do right now. We switch. And then, if we can and the kids are distracted and doing whatever they're doing, we can check an email, or we can, if we really feel that we need to do something, we kind of tap in at that point. But really just having that conversation in the morning, blocking the kids' schoolwork's always done first in the morning to kind of get it out of the way while they're still awake and active and not frustrated because we haven't played with them for the last 4 hours in a row.
So I want to jump in with the thank you, Angela. I think it's helpful because you're speaking as the only one who is a spouse who has a spouse who also works remote full time. I want to chime in with the last question that has been submitted. As a remote worker, as a worker in an office, you can walk away from a client by walking out of the office. But when your home is your office and your client has your home phone and your email and can reach you pretty much nonstop, and you do feel present always to work, how do you manage clients who are not respectful of your boundaries? And let's assume we can't fire our clients because we need the contract and the profit, perhaps especially now. How do you manage those expectations and boundaries from your home? Megan, you've worked as a freelancer. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I still take freelance jobs, but which means my hours for that are even more wonky. Like I can only be reached in evenings and on weekends for that. So for me, it's I can't respond during the day. And if I get an email that comes in and it's from a client that really needs something ASAP, it's something that I state right off the bat is, hey, here are my hours. Here's when you can reach me. Here's why. If you email me, I can't respond to you until this time. So if you anticipate something that's really pressing to come in, most of the time you don't, but if you do, please give me a heads up as much as you can. If you can't, we agreed to this. If I see it, I'll try to jump on it, but chances are I won't because I'm working.
Yeah, it's not always possible to fire a client, but one of the things I have routinely advised people on who have become members at Radius, who are just getting started, they're very fearful of losing any dollar. Sometimes earning the dollar simply isn't worth it. Might not be worth it because of the time and labor you put in, because of the detriment to the quality of life, because it doesn't advance your business or your freelance work. You have clients who are so disrespectful of the terms of work you're willing to accept a contract with them under, then if possible, we've got to either renegotiate their understanding of those terms, and if that can't be done, it's time to let that let that client go. Because chances are there's a client you can work with who will be respectful and cooperative with you. So we're kind of at the end of our hour panel conversation. I think at this point, the thing I want to do, of course, is advise everybody, hey, if you're working remote now for the first time, if you plan to continue remote working, or maybe you want to take a remote job, if you're an employer and you start thinking that perhaps allowing your employees to remote work after this could be a really good idea, perhaps even opens up new potential hires you hadn't thought of before, you're welcome to contact me at Radius. I can give an employer a tour. I can give a remote worker a tour. If you're considering it and you want to speak to other remote workers, come take a tour of the facility that's available to you. The worst thing that happens, I think, to remote workers or freelancers or small businesses is that they get trapped in isolation. They don't have forums and panels like this to have conversations with peers where they can learn healthy and productive skills, and they can learn to negotiate to a better working condition within their business. And so if you do want to work around people who have lots of experience all day, you can join a co-working space here near where that's possible. I'm welcome now to Angela, if you want to close out the YEP portion and say anything on behalf of YEP. I know you kind of covered all the details when we came in. But after that, I'll be happy to unmute everybody. And everybody, if you have alcoholic beverages within range, we could stay on this call for as long as you want to chat. I'm going to leave my contact information in the general chat so that anybody who's interested in reaching out to either meet somebody who's a remote worker like you or to see our facility when the closures are lifted, you'll be able to get a hold of me.
Yeah, I have nothing else really to add. Thank you, everybody, for the conversation. And if anybody feels like they're in a similar situation to me, please feel free to reach out. I obviously don't have it all figured out. It's a day-to-day effort. But if you have any questions or just need someone to commiserate with, I'm always here for you. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. I think Amanda has some things to add, probably.
I know that a lot of folks who joined us today are not members of Young Erie Professionals, and that's totally okay. I think the great thing about this kind of forum is it allows for people we don't normally see at our events to come in. However, normally this would be an in-person event. We do these quite often. This is a drop the mic. We do them quarterly. Every other month we do something called a seat at the table with a local Erie leader who comes and mentors our members. And then every month we do our off the clocks, which is a more traditional networking event. Those are just some of the benefits of joining YEP. So I encourage you, if you have never checked us out before beyond this, this Zoom call, to check out yeperie.org, and I'll stick that in the chat as well. But please stick around and talk. If you have your camera turned off, turn it on so we can see your beautiful faces. Yeah, that's all.
Andrew Chernovskis just linked to a talk he did at Erie Day of Code. If you think that your business is struggling to adapt to remote work and you want to recommend that business hire a consultant, Andrew has given talks here at Radius and at Code conferences on how to succeed in remote work, both as a business and as an employee. He's got tons of incredible insights, and he's routinely advised people here in the co-working space. Okay, now that it is, I'm declaring this official. It is happy hour. So anybody that wants to stick around for a happy hour and to chat, you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera. I think a few of us are going to be hanging around, but certainly, panelists, I do want to thank you so much for what you contributed. You're free to go if you've got to get back to family and other priorities, but if not, I'm going to pour a glass of scotch.
Nice.
Thank you, everyone.
Recording.
Thanks, everyone.